Oh, Christ, this is terrifying. So, basically, we're just going to try and get through this. Yeah, I'm Miles Carter. I'm a creative, predominantly a writer at Adam and Eve DDB. And I absolutely love working in advertising. Being a writer in advertising, is a lot of fun. The amount of different ideas you get to have every day, the amount of different scripts you get to write up every day, the amount of different tones of voice, it's a lot of fun if you enjoy writing. And the best thing, I think, is millions of people get to see your work. You haven't had to try and be cool and get an audience or a fan base or anything. No, if you get a good slot in between X Factor with a piece of work you're proud of, you can confidently say, I made 1 million people smile today, or 1 million people had a giggle because of something I wrote. And to me, that's kind of lovely. That gets me through. But the problem with millions of people seeing your work is that millions of people get to see your work. And those people have YouTube accounts and not much else better to do. So I've taken some comments from, this is from the work I'm proudest of overall. This isn't even the bad stuff. This is the most shittest advert I've ever seen. All right. 2 likes. Wow, this is repellent. No, the attempt at irony doesn't excuse it. Repellent. God. These people are sad enough to put a camera on a cow. And that's a kid as well. That's just an honest opinion. He just saw work and went, sad fucking made that. And the inevitable, be good kids, moon pedo watching. The Daily Mail did a whole article about those comments. Just went through all the comments and kind of name-checked that, and there was a whole Daily Mail. Brilliant. So I am quite used to written abuse. If people sort of don't like my work, that's fine, they go away and write something. What I'm not used to is people's faces and reactions to not liking what I'm saying. So I would ask, if you're not enjoying this, just sort of nod and smile, pretend, and then write me some hate mail later. That's my address. So, again, just pretend you're enjoying it, don't put me off, and then just, write me some hate mail later. And if it's good enough, I might be able to get you into Adam and Eve. But that'd be really pretty well-written hate mail to wing that, but give it a go. So like I said, I've been lucky enough that in a short time in the industry, I've been able to write on some sort of big ads for big brands. And I've had to sort of step up quite quickly from being sort of a placement junior writer to being able to handle these sort of meetings and briefs. And basically what I wanted to share with you today, and it's kind of more for the people who put their hand up in the 1987, 1986 bit earlier, sorry about that, it's just sort of basically the tips and tricks that I've found that really help me to write those big ads for big brands, and hopefully will help you if you get given the opportunity. And the first point doesn't make me proud to say it out loud. It's the sort of thing that I'm quite glad my parents aren't here to hear me say. I get all the visions of Bill Hicks going, if you work in marketing, kill yourself, come flooding back. It's a kind of, oh, God, marketing talk kind of thing. But it is irritatingly helpful. And it is just quite simply, be the brand. Now, the reason I kind of feel a bit sick saying that is because it does, when you first start, feel like you're selling out a little bit. Writing always starts off as such a personal thing. You tend to think of yourself as a type of writer. You like writing in a certain way. And so when you get your first brief, you go, I want to write a brief in that tone of voice. And yeah, that's not really going to always work. I mean, you're going to have to write stuff about stuff for stuff that you don't like or necessarily agree with. Vegetarians are going to have to write ads involving meat. Non-smokers used to have to write ads about cigarettes. United fans have to do things about bodily hygiene. And it's just, these clashes happen, and you're not going to be able to beat it. And if it's a battle between millions of pounds of branding and research and years of brand history versus your appreciation of Hunter Thompson, you're going to lose every single time. So the main point is really don't fight the brand. A lot of times you have to say stuff in advertising that it's a bit embarrassing, like open happiness. No one would say that in a normal day-to-day conversation, but when a brand says it, it's fine. So in sort of one way, speaking as the brand and trying to adopt their tone of voice is quite liberating. You don't kind of have that self-defense mechanism anymore, and your work ends up just feeling a lot more confident because you're speaking as them, not as yourself. But also, it's not just about accepting it, because the last thing I want people to think I'm saying is, lose your individuality, lose how you want to write. What I'm saying is, once you've kind of learnt their tone of voice, you can then start pushing it a little bit more. So sort of adopt and adapt the tone of voice, use it and then abuse it, don't fight it. And so it's a very helpful setup. So just to show that, I'm going to show the Marlborough piece of work.
It looks really good on you. Thank you.
Wow. Did you do that?
Yeah, it took me ages.
Look. Thank you. Merry Christmas, darling. Thank you, Mum. Oh, gosh. And he waves.
You ready for this?
Oh my.
Waved. It's a unicorn.
Thank you. Thank you, Grandma. Shut up! Oh my God! Yes! Oh, yes! Thank you! I love it! I love it! Look at it! Look at it! This is the best present ever!
Thank you very much. Ooh. And just, I don't want to brag, but kind of genius. Mary Claire. So the point I'm trying to make with that one is that was very much of the Mulberry world. It was, it was rich, sexy people in a big country pile. It's nothing I can really relate to or in a style that I can write, but just by sort of adopting that tone of voice and that style, we were then able to do something quite different with it. So if you're finding it, you're clashing with kind of the brand and how you want, it's a lot easier to take it on board and then try and sort of fight it and push it from the inside rather than just trying to put your own tone of voice upon it. And it tends to be more popular work, and it tends to, I think, be more original, more different. It's easier to go with it and push it than fight it, basically. So that was the first point. Adopt and adapt, don't fight the tone of voice. Mini point time. Don't over-direct your scripts. This is something I'm really, really guilty of, and it's kind of more for people just starting out, I guess. But it's very, very tempting to kind of, when you're imagining a film, sort of seeing it, you get delusions of grandeur, I'm going to be a director. And you start writing things like the camera pans around here, or cut to there, or leave that all out. Just focus on action and dialogue, and then that makes you concentrate on that, makes it a lot easier, and also it leaves more room for the director to come and put their layer of genius on top. So, very simple mini point, don't over-direct your scripts, keep it simple, dialogue and action, and it'll end up being better, I've found. So the second point I want to make is know more about your audience. Now this seems like a quite obvious point. It is really. Everyone says know your audience, know what's in the sort of the cultural zeitgeist at the time, know what they like, even to the point of if you're on the shoot and something happened in the world that day, oh, quickly, can we try making a joke about that? You really do need to know all these points. But I was lucky enough when I first started in the first year, I just left placement I got to write some of the Orange Gold spots. And I don't know if you remember that campaign. It's when Orange ruined a film in the cinema by trying to put branding in there where they shouldn't put branding in. And these used to be written by just incredible writers at Mother, and there were 7 or 8 senior writers on them at one time because they were kind of a bit of a jewel in the crown. And there I was just on my own after my first year trying to write them. And so, obviously, I struggled a bit. But the main advice I was given was by a creative director of mine, a guy called Sam Hibbard, who's now a director at Some Such, amazing writer, really incredible director as well. And so all the jokes I'd been trying to write in were clever word plays about, it was for the Expendables, I should mention. Don't remember Sylvester Stallone, and basically we were going to put Jay from The Inbetweeners in the Expendables as sort of like network boy. And so all the jokes I was kind of coming up with were quite sort of subtle. I mean, the scene is absurd enough as it is, so I thought it would just kind of play out, that's fine. But no, the bit of advice he gave me was, these aren't jokes for a big crowd. Because this was going in the cinema, and I'd never thought about it before. Like, what do you mean these aren't jokes for a big crowd? And he's like, in a sort of perfect Aussie way, like, yeah, big audiences are dumb, mate. And so the bigger the audience, sort of the dumber the jokes kind of have to be in a little way. You want big sign-pointed jokes. If you know there's a big joke coming up, you know your mate over here is going to laugh at it, they're going to laugh at it, so let's all laugh together, have a shared moment, that's rather lovely. So when in big audiences like that, like in the cinema, it's good to make quite big, obvious jokes. So rather than anything too subtle, one of the jokes we went for was them all just uploading a selfie together, which I treasured that photo. He was actually there. I know that looks photoshopped, but he was actually there. And the reason the quality is so bad is because Lionsgate aren't allowing this on the internet anywhere because they're worried people will mistake it for the actual trailer of the film. So that's all I could get for that. So I found that really, really helpful, because with Mulberry, it's something very, very different. With that, it was an online film. You know people are going to have headphones in, they're going to be focused, and they're going to be able to indulge in the scenario you've written a lot more. You've created this world, just ridiculous situations with unicorns and puppies that wave in it, but you know they're going to be focusing on it, and you don't have to point things out to them. And so just in that sense, the humor can be a lot subtler, a lot softer. In the way the grand just kind of goes, oh, for God's sake. If we'd done that in The Expendables, everyone had completely missed it. And so just by changing where your audience is watching your piece of work, you have to change your bit of writing to go with it. And I found that really, really helpful, because that's just an extra level of detail on who your audience is and how they're going to be. That really helps tailor your specific work for that specific area and helping it be the best it can be. And with sort of when you're coming to write on sort of big brands, there isn't much forgiveness. So every little detail you can get about your audience and how you can tailor your writing to fix that, like I said, even if it's sitting in a cinema with mates compared to a laptop, there are tweaks you can make to your writing that I think will help be a better end product. So we've got one more mini point here. Don't use death. There was a piece of work that came out last year, and my boss at work told me I should name check it, otherwise it sounds like I'm just being a pussy about it, is Edeka. I don't know if anyone saw that. It was a German brand, and they did, basically my boss from Adam and Eve, which has basically become the storytelling agency, went over to their agency and did a whole talk about storytelling, basically how to do a John Lewis advert. And then about 6-7 months later, they came out with their own version. And it involved an old man on his own dying. And then he spent about 1.5 minutes watching his kids break down in tears in their various offices, just floods of tears falling against the wall in their doctor's scrubs. It's God almighty. And they all get together and go to his house just to divvy up his stuff. And he walks around the corner going, surprise, I wasn't dead. By the way, I put on lunch. And it was him kind of going, well, I knew you wouldn't come for Christmas lunch otherwise. What the hell? And this has got about 36 million hits on YouTube. It's apparently brilliant. And it just left me just baffled. Just what? If my dad pulled that trick on me and I turned up at Christmas Day and he was like, surprise, I've got lunch from Edeka, I probably would kill him. But I understand why they did it, because, my next point is this, but basically, you've got to make emotion. The quickest way to get someone to like your work is to create an emotion in them, but don't use death. For whatever reason, it's just a cheap, easy, lazy way to create emotion. There are more imaginative ways, and you're better than that. Right. That's my I had to get a mini rant in the talk, so I just wanted to get that done. So, the third one is about emotion. So be honest, do you feel anything? or as me and my partner at work now call it, is it in yet? Sorry. Now, it seems really, really simple, but it is quite a difficult thing to get your head around, and it's something that when it clicks is infinitely helpful when it comes to writing a piece of work. With anything you write and you try to create, you are trying to transfer whatever emotion you feel in you into someone else. That's basically what art in any form is, transference of emotion. And it's very, very hard to do that if you're not feeling it yourself. If you're trying to create an emotion in someone and you don't have that same thing in you, you're going to really, really struggle. So it really, really helps just be perfectly honest with yourself. Does writing this scare me, or make me laugh, or make me sad, or make me anxious or happy? And I think, obviously, the time this has been the most use is when trying to come up with John Lewis Christmas campaigns. Now, that's a heritage of work that's quite hard to follow. And when we first started, we'd written about somewhere between 20 to 30 different scripts, like full 2-page long, 3-page long scripts. We thought about music, and there was one about a little girl who discovered her grandma used to be a famous ballerina, and then set about trying to bring music back into her life, and that was sort of the Christmas present there. There was one about a fox who lived outside a town, and he becomes friends with the farmer's daughter, and for the first Christmas ever, he doesn't have to watch it from the woods, he's part of it. And there are all these sort of scripts, I thought, that sounds like a John Lewis ad. I could plausibly imagine that having a John Lewis logo at the end of it. And we had about 2 hours before the deadline left, so we thought, we've got time for one more thing here. We've got time to come up with one more script. And so there wasn't time to think about the heritage or what cute animal it could be or anything like that. We just had to be very, very honest with ourselves. And so we just went, when you think about Christmas, just talking to each other, what is your instant gut feeling? And for personal reasons, for both of us that year, it was thinking about our granddads. For both of our granddads, it was the first time they were going to be having Christmas alone, unfortunately. My granddad had just moved. My gran passed away a few years before, but it was the first time he'd moved far away. And so he wasn't going to be able to drive down for Christmas. And for my partner, Sophie Knox, her granddad's first Christmas alone in decades. And so we just both started talking about our granddads at Christmas and the thought of them being alone. And before we knew it, we were both genuinely quite upset. And that was far more emotional than anything we'd spent the 2 weeks beforehand working on. We knew it didn't fit into the sort of the John Lewis sort of template of what their ads usually are, sort of cute and cuddly, nice twist. But all we knew was, Christ, I'm really feeling something here. So this has got to be a base. This has got to be a truth and an insight that other people will relate to as well. And so from then, the job really became, well, if this is a real emotion, and this is something we can really latch onto, what's the creative way of representing that? And that's a far smaller leap and a far smaller step from what's the next John Lewis. What's the creative way of representing this real emotion is a far easier brief. And so for us, we started talking, and that's how we came up with The Man on the Moon, imagining our granddads just up there, just watching Christmas happen from a distance, but unable to participate in it. And yeah, instantly started getting very, very emotional. And the thing was, that emotion really shone out even when we presented the work. Like I said, everything else was properly scripted up, 2-3 pages, and this was all we presented for Man on the Moon. Very first presentation, this was the exact slide. That's all it was. And a little Wallace and Gromit reference in there. But you can see the story changed ever so slightly, but the core emotion, the heart of it, is in there. And that little bit of truth, that little emotion, shone out over every other much more detailed script we wrote, and in the end, everyone else's scripts. And it's another point of why I absolutely love advertising, is that you can quickly go from that, just one page. That one page basically just resulted in a year of my life that was just incredible, and culminating in this. That is one of my favorite photos of all time. He is the coolest dude in the world, by the way, the Man on the Moon. This French guy called Jean Messini. He was born in Tangiers. He's played the saxophone since the age of 4. He used to turn up every day in his big, cool French glasses with a leather trilby on. He was absolutely amazing. And so I just want to end just quickly telling a quick story about him. The hardest shot we were going to have to get for Man on the Moon was when he receives the present. We all knew that's the crux of this. if we don't get that shot, there's no emotion, there's no story, no one will care. He'll just look like a sad old fucker on the moon. So we had to absolutely get that. And this is what he ended up doing. And that was the very first take. The very first take, we used exactly what he did, and it was just perfect. It was one of the most emotional moments I've ever had on set. My partner Sophie just started crying. There were sort of claps. And if you do go back and watch it, just the wave of joy you see just flowing over him, it's some of the most beautiful acting I've ever seen. It was just incredible and powerful and perfect and just beautiful. And it was that. And so I went up to him afterwards and just said, Jean, that was just fucking brilliant. Thank you so, so much. Do you mind me asking, what were you thinking about? How did you get that reaction? He went, I'll tell you. I was thinking about how, after 13 long years, I finally got divorced from my wife. So, thank you very much.